Yvonne, why are you doing this? Why are you coming out talking about, why do you want to talk about HIV?
I know. So I know it sounds crazy because people would be thinking that's the one thing you should keep quiet about. But I think because of the stigma, and because so many women have said that their experience isn't reflected widely enough on the HIV stage or socially talked about. And I think because I struggled so much with it, I mean, I got a diagnosis in 1998. And that happened at a time where the conversation about HIV was about gay men. Gay black men. There wasn't even even though it was happening on a large scale in Africa, when I got my diagnosis, all I knew was that it was about death and dying. And the other question I was thinking was, how did this happen to me? Because they've said it can't happen to women. And in the time since then, it's been about living with HIV, coming to terms with it. A lot of my time was actually spent not coming to terms with it. Well, no one talks about that either.
And that's what I wanted to ask you. Like, did you ever see yourself talking about it? When you cast your mind back to when you first found out, did you ever envisage that you'd get to this stage where you're out and proud, so to speak? You're out, you're talking about HIV. Why not?
Out and proud.
How was you? What was it like when you first found out?
I was terrified and I was numb, and there was a lot of fear because there was still a lot of anger in society in general about HIV, not understood. And I felt so, you couldn't feel more out of place than I felt, and it shouldn't be happening to me. And remember, you've just been given a long term, it's looked at as a long-term chronic illness, but back then it was like being told, right, okay, put your affairs in order, I think the phrase is. And sorry, I was just going to say, you get a diagnosis like that, and then there's the silence of, where do I go? Who do I talk to? Where is it going to be safe for me to talk? And emotionally, I hadn't registered. I was all over the place.
So I think, to put this in perspective, at the time that you was diagnosed, and even I kind of feel at the time that I was diagnosed, there wasn't so much discussion. It felt like it was just so hidden. It was just such a taboo subject. And it was only, from what I could see, the gay community and people that were non-British that seemed to be impacted by HIV. So at that time, I felt really alone. How did you feel when you first found out? Like, how was it for you? Was there
massively alone, because it's like you said, in the gay community, there was already a sense of a discussion around it. There had been, in general society, if you compare to COVID, there'd been like this sense of blaming. We need someone to point a finger, and the community had turned around and they'd made their position clear. They were fighting back. Whereas when I looked at any other community, I didn't see the African community and I didn't understand their response. There was no information. But in terms of me being here, born in this country, trying to understand what the hell has just happened, I had no baseline to kind of say, okay, I know this is what our community is like. So the only person I knew was Magic Johnson as a man in America, black person in America, black man. But here in the UK, no point of reference is what I'm saying. I didn't know how to identify or figure out what was going on or where to turn that reflected my experiences.
I mean, we can start going through the layers, but let's start at the first kind of stage, which is, everyone would know that you've had sex, and the fact that, the sex you had meant that, you were, I don't know, you put yourself in a position or you know, you didn't look after yourself. I don't know, you know, people have all sorts
Oh
at
my
that time,
God,
and I don't
yeah.
feel like that now, which is why it's quite difficult to actually say that. But at that time, I was brought up Catholic.
Right.
Catholic, and you know, you're supposed to be a good girl, and you know, you ask for, you know, forgiveness, and you go to confession, and you do not have sex before marriage, and you know all that kind of stuff. I'm not gonna maybe another
Yeah,
time
no,
we'll talk
because you're
about that
right.
in more depth,
How
but do
did you
you know what I'm
sit?
talking about?
Yeah, how did you sit with the shame? Because yeah, I brought
Yeah,
up in church, and that's one of the things I said. There was a finger wagging. It was always said, "Don't get pregnant, don't get pregnant, don't get pregnant,"
yeah,
which meant don't have sex, don't have sex. And it was not only
yeah,
is the shame, but it's the punishment. Because remember, we're having sex outside of marriage. And so everybody does it in the dark. If we catch any other
yeah,
STI, you can go in the close of darkness to the clinic and get yourself sorted. Now I've got something that's a long-term reminder of the sex that I had. And that was difficult. That was difficult.
So, you know, that's spot on. And I kind of think that maybe in our time when we found out, which was, you know, a number of years ago, I kind of think that, you know, sex was spoken about as just don't have it and don't get pregnant. And I think the discussion should be about if you have sex, how can you have it in a healthy relationship, or have sex in a way that meets your needs, that you feel comfortable with, and you're looking after your emotional health and your physical health, rather than don't have sex because you're going to get pregnant or you're going to catch something. It's about how can you do it? How can you manage that? So let's talk about women in particular. How can women do that and take charge, you know, over their kind of sexuality, you know, because we all have sex. I don't know why. I actually get quite irritated now at this kind of taboo. And I feel it's a patriarchal and a racist and a system that kind of keeps us in this box of what a woman should and shouldn't be doing with their sexuality.
And I still think the conversations before you start sex, but even more so once you're HIV positive, navigating how you have sex, whether it's in a relationship or not, it still isn't talked about. And as women, how we navigate it before or after diagnosis is still not talked about well enough. I'm fortunate to be given the opportunity now to be talking to groups of African women about PrEP and discovering, all of the things you said. We're not talking about PrEP and if you're HIV negative, how to remain negative with this medication that's out there. But for me, my whole journey to becoming comfortable with myself, my sexuality, and my HIV status meant, like you, I've had to go back and try and unpick, why was it such a hard diagnosis to manage? Why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? Why do I feel the stigma? Because you internalize it to the nth degree. It's like someone walks in front of you, claps their hand, and this dust is just layered over you with the diagnosis. And I think it starts with the sense of a lack of support. Not being able to talk doesn't allow you to figure out how you feel. But a lot of what we feel is about being shrouded in shame as a woman, being shrouded in shame because I'm Black, being shrouded in shame because I'm having sex. Everything about me is supposed to be shameful. So that, I think, for me was one of the ultimate. To get condemned by God, in effect, was the ultimate, right, you are totally imperfect. You know, this notion of original sin and this whole, if God has sent down something to punish you for what you're doing, the ultimate being told off by the teacher. And it took a long time. It took a long time. And I think what I'm worried about is so many of us don't have spaces where we can unpick or even check in about, okay, so what is my preference? How do I make myself comfortable with sex again after the diagnosis?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's part of the mission is to start having conversations, not just with women, but with men, but also get in spaces where we can talk about, yes, I'm HIV positive, but how can I be happy and healthy and have relationships or engage in sexual contact with other people and be okay?
You know what came to my mind actually, Yvonne, you know, because if we, I think HIV is just so closely linked to the fact that, you know, sex, you know, it's just so closely linked to the fact that you've had sex. And I do kind of think, you know, that, you know, maybe when I think about where I was and where I've come to, and the benefit of being able to talk to a like-minded woman of a similar age about it is that, you know, we've been through quite a journey of discovery, and we've come out the other end and said, actually, we're okay. You know, we're not, you know, we're not like, you know, naughty or be punished or unclean or any of these ridiculous kind of notions. But it does make me think, I think especially for any of the younger audience kind of listening in, I don't know why it just comes to my head, but, you know, like, I think that, you know, I don't know why Pornhub just come to my head, but I think there's something that I wanted to say about, you know, what sex is and, you know, the way in which sex is seen. In our day, it was seen as a certain thing, and now how is it seen? I think that because of, you know, of the internet and things like Pornhub and how accessible it is, I'm kind of talking to the women more than the men as I say this, which is, it's okay, it's absolutely fine. You enjoy your sex, girl, you know, on your terms, you know, and let's not forget that you may have parents and a family and a community out there that are influencing how you kind of manage your own sexuality. And then we get a guy that will come into our world, and, you know, a young girl might not really understand how to navigate that because they are competing with the Pornhubs and the family and the pregnancy and the Instagram models and the fat ass and, you know, the tits and all this stuff. So there's a lot of stuff out there, you know, that that makes sex and sexuality, I think, taken over. You know, I'm kind of fed up with the different entities that have taken over what sex is, which is a lovely, wonderful thing that makes you feel, you know, really quite nice if you feel comfortable with it and you're in charge of what you're doing and you don't feel used, you don't feel forced, you know. So I kind of wanted to put that in there because I think in our day, you know, sorry, I think what I'm trying to say here is the stigma. That is why I feel there's so much kind of stigma around sex, because the discussion about sex is kind of one-sided and it's taken over by the media, by social media, and by, you know, different kind of, you know, entities, so to speak, you know, and therefore we don't talk about
it. And so when you say that, for me, it's one thing to figure it out because we've done in our minds an intellectual sort of like take on it. But it took me seeing people like Miss Storm, Erica Storm, and going to places where I could get support because.
Who's Erica Storm? Who's Erica Storm?
Right, okay, Miss Erica Storm. We need to tag her, because she looks at sex from a woman's point of view, and he teaches body confidence and how to look at sex from a whole point of view rather than it's something dirty to be done in the dark. And it's about getting women to get back in touch with their bodies and to be okay with it, because I don't know whether people realize when you get a diagnosis like HIV, and when you talk about sex, you lose sexuality a lot of the time, and for the longest time. And I think even peppered thereafter, there's this sense that I don't like my body is dirty, my body is tainted. And so the slowing down and having voices that can remind you that sex can be fun and that your body can be fun again requires time, and being referred to supportive groups or people who can do that is really important. Because I think a lot of the time I've heard people say straight away, I'll never have sex again, because it was the dirty thing that we're doing. And now I need us to find spaces, make spaces where we talk about these hidden feelings, so that we go, okay, let's reclaim it and let's understand what the stigma is doing to us and how we feel about ourselves. Because we deal with a lot from society outside coming in. You get that level of stigma, but it's what it's doing inside to you, how you feel about your body. Because one of the things I felt was robbed and cheated and betrayed. My body isn't good enough. It doesn't function well. It's not okay anymore. And there was no one to talk to me about what was going on inside. So you take your tablets, you think you're all right, but actually internally there was a war going on. And I really needed to sit in a space where it was safe to say, this is how I feel. This is how I feel.
That's amazing. That is so deep what you've just said there, because especially what you just said about disassociation. If we cast our minds back to when we first found out we had HIV, I know I felt like that. I felt disassociated from my body. It was, like unclean or embarrassed. I was ashamed of that. And of that, I was ashamed of my, the sexuality and what I had attracted, what I had caught, why me, all that kind of stuff goes through. And I wish, if I know now if I knew then what I know now, it would have been so much easier to maybe heal myself in terms of not the HIV, but the emotional part of being a woman, being a single mother, being a Black woman in a senior leadership role within the workplace, and having this thing, it was a lot. And I think I probably went through a lot of depression and didn't realize it. Like, what were the layers that you had to deal with when you found out?
Let's talk about the shutdown, because I didn't realize. We think we are resilient. I'm every woman. Do you know what I mean? But actually, the emotional trauma of the diagnosis meant that the only way I could cope with this lack of, because I lost friends, my family couldn't cope with it, and I wasn't coping with it, and definitely not feeling safe. Not only not to talk about it, but not safe to go anywhere or know who I could or get access to information. And I just shut down and carried on working. And when I look at that, I see such a massive trauma response and a lack of compassion for myself, because you beat yourself up about if I had. But I didn't understand that I was grieving. If there's the one word in terms of emotions, please, can people understand that with every long-term diagnosis, there is some sense of, there is Macmillan Cancer support, and you are supported and allowed to grieve and to process and move through, whereas we are silenced. And I couldn't grieve.
You are amazing. You absolutely are. What you have just said there is just so important. Who would realize that, not for everybody, but for some people. And I think what you and I are talking about was how it was for us, and we went through a phase of disassociation and grieving and loss. And who would link HIV to that? But the way in which you kind of articulated that is so important. I think you've really kind of nailed it with that sentence, that feeling of loss and grief, at that particular time. And Yeah, I do believe that emotions can sometimes get kind of stored and trapped within one's body, you know, in terms of the heaviness of carrying that and not being able to kind of navigate oneself around sexuality, about the loss, about one's body. Where do we get that information from? You know, at our time, we didn't have that. We had to learn that the hard way.
And make more mistakes along the way. Because I just think you're talking about, it's not just an emotional and an internal dissociation. Remember, what's happening is, in terms of being able to reach out and being very, what do they say, social animals. If we are social animals, at the one point you are at your most vulnerable and should be able to connect to a particular loved one, to family, to community, to society, all those layers in terms of reaching out and being supported are taken away from us. And so you're asked to live long-term in isolation. And again, that level of isolation stops you from processing and only internalizes the trauma that you're feeling more and more and more. And I can understand that that can explode out in lots of different ways. So for me, maybe it was working manically just over and over and over again. It's like washing. If I wash myself, will I make myself clean? If I work hard enough, will it be okay? And I think some of the behaviors are just maladaptations to the pain that's going on inside that we cannot articulate. And the lack of information, the mental torture of beating yourself up about something that nobody, my friend says, dear friend says, nobody asked for HIV. How we get it only makes it worse, because it is, in society's eyes, still being seen as something we're punished for having sex for outside of marriage. But the reality is, there are men and women who acquire sex inside of marriage as well. Marriage doesn't protect you from HIV, and the morals and the judgment that we've put around it don't make any sense either. And they're false narratives and stories that society has used that really need deconstructing out aloud. But when you get the diagnosis, you really do need to sit in a group of people to hear how you feel spoken by other people, so you know you're not alone, but also to be deconstructed so you don't carry them and continue to torture yourself with stuff that is absolute nonsense.
No, absolutely. And I kind of think there's something about, I think now I've got to, you know, this stage in my life where I've lived with HIV. I mean, when I first found out, I was so underground, meaning I told nobody. I was absolutely, you know, like, you know, so just tense. And like what you said, for me, I just kind of threw myself into work. I threw myself into alcohol and cigarettes, and I threw myself into trying to not accept the part of me. I just kept it away, you know. I just tried to keep it away, and that's quite heavy stuff. And the reason that we are now wanting to talk about this so openly is so that if there are other people out there, you know, with HIV, that they don't feel so alone. Because just like you, when I found out, it was just Magic Johnson and Freddie Mercury, you know. And even now, if you Google like HIV celebrities, you won't find anybody, you know. And I think that's you won't, and that's because society, you know, that saying that sex sells. I think if we let the system, you know, take sexuality and package it up the way they want to package it up, you know, anyway, I don't want to kind of go down that road, but I kind of think I've reclaimed who I am. And it's a very long journey. I wouldn't say I'm 100% there yet with the shame. The shame doesn't go away overnight. I've had to do so much work to to deal with the remnants of shame that is still within my body. And part of the reason that I am doing this is so that if there's anybody, you know, who has HIV and it's really, really difficult, you know, there are things that, you know, one can do to look after your body, to accept yourself emotionally, physically, you know, spiritually. And when you do that, actually, it can make you even more kind of at one and at peace, and you can discover freedom with the world, because that's what HIV done for me. And I do question if I didn't have HIV, would I be this person today?
I know yeah, well, because that's what I thought. In terms of the lessons I had to learn, the unpacking ended up not just being about HIV, because you're right, it's like you said, I had been so busy trying to get into relationships, and I saw myself as, oh, I am not complete until I, you know, have this man and I have this particular life. And then to see myself in terms of people pleasing and always being available and always being a great gal for everybody else. And I think HIV stripped me of my identity, because I lost so many friends and I lost family and I lost a sense of meaning and self and a sense of being punished. And I had to really pick through the medication. Managing my HIV was one thing, but picking through everything that it had made me feel meant that I had to challenge a lot of the feelings and thoughts and the beliefs that I had inside. And you're right, I looked for your side because I wanted to do body work about some of the, okay, how do I release the anxiety? How do I release the depression? How do I release the multiple voices going round in my head? How do I find a space where I don't hide the HIV, where it is as much a part of the work that I'm doing with a group of people who get it as well? Because a lot of the time, to go into counselling is one thing, but to go into counselling and not feel confident that you'll be accepted and be able to counsel me on the mental ill health that the HIV diagnosis is creating inside of me, that I am turning around, is really difficult. So I'm trying to look at spaces where mental, emotional, physical, being able to go into churches, spiritual spaces where, again, I don't have to hide my HIV status, where the support can come from day one and all of me holistically is looked after, or else I am only living a fragment of a life in fragmented spaces. And I just thought that is more part of the shame again. I'm never seen as a whole person coming to, how can I be authentic if I cannot tell you all that I'm about and all of that experience? So I saw you.
Amazing. I love talking to you. I love talking to you.
Yeah, but it's been a long time, and I just think until we come out and start saying, me too, this is what it was like for me, and look at all of what me too looks like, because I do think we implode with the diagnosis, we explode with the diagnosis, and have no places to go. Many of the people, many of the women that I talk to have sat on the diagnosis in total silence, a decade or more. Never talking about it. And I'm thinking, what is that doing to our bodies inside our minds?
Do you know what? You know, there's so much I want to carry on, but I want to ask you this. Did you know at the time, and when you was in the midst of your diagnosis, was you depressed and anxious?
I probably was. I think
that's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
You probably,
because I was so busy moving really, really fast that I had no space. And no space to process meant that I was moving fast, like something would be, like a darkness could be chasing me and I'd be running like merry hell. trying to avoid it, because that's what you do. If I'm busy enough, I don't have to feel what I'm feeling, because I didn't know how to process, and I didn't understand the range of emotions I was going through and what to do with them anyway.
So yeah, I that's what I wanted to hear from you when you said probably, because I feel the same. I think I probably was depressed and I probably was anxious, but at that time I didn't have a label to put that. I didn't understand what was going on. You know, it was just there. What I would like to do maybe the next time we talk, Yvonne, is talk about those feelings. You know, were we depressed? How did we manage that? You know, we can look back and be a little bit more reflective, because I think nowadays it's a lot easier for people to identify how they feel in relation to depression and anxiety and mental, you know, health, because there's a lot more out there. But I still think there's something around people not really acknowledging how they're feeling, and the importance of feeling safe to do that, because that kind of stuff kind of can get kind of trapped, and it's important to release that stuff. And yeah,
I agree, because I still think, like I said, we still think we're supposed to be coping. Black women don't break. We're supposed to carry everything all the time. And again, not even having words to be able to pinpoint, I am feeling X, I am feeling Y, is really difficult, if at all. And so, yeah, creating a safe space where we can identify what we're feeling, talk about it in a safe space, and not be stigmatized, massively important. And I'm all for creating that.
I mean, yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking about the layers. You know, let's not even start about being a Black woman, because, you know, it really winds me up. You know, Black strong woman. No, I'm not always strong, and I don't always want that label. I want to be vulnerable. I cry. I feel sad. You know, things make me upset. You know, but I think that being, especially, you know, with my, you know, being of Caribbean origin, you know, you stiff upper lip and you just get on with it, you know. There's another discussion to be had there.
Oh no, it'd be great. You know what I'm looking forward to is yoga as well.
Yes.
It's what can I do? What practices can I put into my daily routine that will help me to acknowledge how I feel and move it forward? And stay safe and well.
Yeah, that's good. We'll have a think about that as well. So if there's anyone listening and they've got any comments or any questions, you can contact us at positiveyoga.uk and we will respond straight away. Thank you so much, Yvonne. I think you're an amazing, beautiful, Black, wonderful, intelligent woman, and I bow to the divine in you.
Oh my God, bow to the divine in you too. I think it's been amazing. The more women I meet and men that I meet, the less alone I feel, and our experiences need to be honoured. So thank you for being part of the journey.
And thank you for being part of mine. I love you lots. Bye-bye.
Bye.